Welcome, Alex Flores. Hello, my friend.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to Guided Home. I know you've been here before. You've attended our Anchor into Healing men's workshop, but it's an honor to have you here sitting across from me. So, Alex Flores, you are a trauma-informed fatherhood coach, correct?
Yes.
So tell us about that. Tell us about your journey.
So I'm a father, and it kind of led me to become a trauma-informed fatherhood coach. Not because I experienced trauma, but, I've worked in the field of maternal mental health and early childhood education for over a decade and went through my own mental health struggles, my own struggles in fatherhood, excuse me. And I really dug deep to get through it. And in that process, in my own healing journey, and, I kind of realized that even though I had the skill sets and the knowledge and the experience in working in a field for 10 years, working with parents and children, I was struggling. And I felt there was a need for men that didn't have exposure to this stuff, right? And I saw there was a need. I had the tools to share, and I went through my own healing journey and got to the other side through discovering a lot of holistic approaches, breathwork, yoga, intuitive body movement, just really stuff that I had no idea existed. And then when I discovered it, it was just so life-changing that I had to figure out a way how to use some of my professional background, my experience, and bring it to men that might not have the opportunity to learn these types of things. So I guess that's how I became a trauma-informed fatherhood coach. I'm also an infant and early childhood mental health consultant. So I work with preschoolers and their teachers.
Okay.
And I provide, reflective practice with them and support them in developing deeper relationships with the children by understanding kind of what's going on with their own emotions in those moments. Same thing with parents and fathers. So a lot of the experiences I bring to the work I do are from my professional background, but as well as being a father, understanding how hard it is. I grew up in trauma. I grew up in abuse and neglect. And when I became a father, all I wanted to do was be the best father possible. And that was really difficult, even though I had the skills and the knowledge and I knew it all and I was intellectualizing all the stuff I've been through. But when it got to a point where I couldn't do it anymore, I think I turned inward and somehow became a trauma-informed fatherhood coach. It was just a journey to get here. And it's something that still blows my mind because I had all the tools, all the pieces were in place. I just had to really sit with myself and kind of guide myself back to my purpose, which is supporting men through fatherhood and through the challenges. And if they've experienced trauma, I know how incredibly difficult it could be to show up and give your child love and grace and compassion when they may not have received that as children. So yeah, it's something that I do from the bottom of my heart. It's very heart-centered in the work I do. And, I do it through a trauma-informed lens. I think I just, I put that part in because this is not easy. It's a lot more complex than just taking a deep breath. I know I say that to simplify things, but it's a lot more complex and really, it's relationship-based. It's work I do is one-on-one with fathers, and I support them on their healing journey to do the work to heal their traumas, to show up as better fathers for their children.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. That's a lot. So I always say being a parent is kind of the biggest refining fire, right?
Yeah.
It's a mirror for everything that you've probably suppressed, and the things that you haven't yet looked at within yourself shows up in your relationships, not just with your partner, but with your children. So let's reverse engineer that. So before you got to this point of being an informed trauma fatherhood coach, what was your journey before that? You sound like you have an extensive educational background. Share a little bit about that.
I've always worked with children as far as I can remember. As I was a teenager, I was volunteering with kids. As a young adult, I was volunteering with teenagers. And, I didn't get into working with children kind of into my second career until I was 25, 26. But I started working with after school programs, and that led to working with middle schoolers and just all this pull to work with children. At some point, I decided to go back to school to get a degree in sociology, and then I got into a program where they placed me in early childhood education. And it was a Teach for America program where they teach pre-K through 12th across the nation, and they place you in a high-needs school. I got placed in preschool. I was really pissed off at that point. I was like, what the hell? I want to teach middle school. I want to teach real kids, not little babies. And I just decided to take it. They're going to pay for my master's degree. It's like, all right, cool. Wow. Sign me up. And I was in the classroom, and I think everything started to make sense. I was also getting my master's degree in early childhood education. So I was learning about child development. I was really intrigued on trauma and how it was affecting how it affected child development. And I started to intellectualize and start to learn things about myself through this process. I fell in love with early childhood education. I stayed in the classroom for 3 years and had some of the greatest experiences working with children. Then I became a father. And at that point, it wasn't as easy as managing 16 4-year-olds in a classroom. It blows my mind that I was able to maintain, these children and support them and guide them. But when it became my child, it was this different, like you said, it's a different feeling.
It is.
So I started struggling just in connecting and just feeling these emotions that were coming up that were very overwhelming.
Okay.
And that led to a lot of, mental health challenges throughout the years. I was diagnosed with depression, anxiety, at one point PTSD. It was, my marriage at that point was struggling. And I went through a mental health crisis because it was so much and so overwhelming. Like in my head, I couldn't compute, like, why do I have all the knowledge? Why do I have the intellectual ability to think these things and to understand them, but I can't do it in my body. My body feels so dysregulated, I feel overwhelmed. Right. So that mental health crisis led me to go to an IOP, an intensive outpatient program. And actually, I've been to 2. Back in 2018, I went to one, and it helped a lot. Like, I've been on my journey for a long time.
Sure.
A lot of therapy, a lot of just inward work. But this was at that point in 2018, I went to one, kind of gained my bearings and was able to get by. But I really still didn't feel good. I was on a lot of medication at that time. And in 2020, in February 2020, right before the pandemic, I had another kind of mental health crisis. I just wasn't able to hold in my emotions. It was just, my daughter was 4 around that time, and the pandemic was happening. I was struggling at work. And then I went to this IOP. It changed my life. The IOP introduced me to breathwork, yoga, had a sound bath there.
Okay.
We would do them weekly, just groups. And in that, I was introduced to powerful modalities that just changed my perspective of my mental health, like completely. From intellectualizing all of the stuff I know, all of the mental health. At that point, I was working in maternal mental health. I was working with new moms and their children and with histories of child abuse, neglect, or any kind of trauma they may have experienced. So I had all of this knowledge, but it was hard for me to apply it into understanding why I was feeling what I was feeling. Wow. So through understanding breathwork and more of a holistic approach, it opened up my body, and I was able to embody at that point what was kind of going on. And it was very overwhelming. So it was a very difficult journey back, but I think I discovered a tool that was life-changing, which was breathwork. And doing breathwork every day, daily since like February 2020 is something that has changed my life tremendously. I'll tell anyone that listens, it's not easy. It's not something that you can just do once in a while and think you'll get these huge benefits. It's a practice, Right. It's something that I discovered, and what I feel it did is it just embodied what was going on in my head into my body. So I had that journey from my head to my heart, and that's it's a short journey, but it's a very long process and a very arduous and painful process.
Yes.
And breath was able to get me through that. And I've been practicing breath work daily for 4.5 years. And, I think when you practice something hard every day, it becomes essentially something that's part of you, but it's no longer as difficult as just practice. It's as if I'm, prepping my nervous system for the day. I came up with a cool analogy the other day. I don't surf. I don't know if this really holds true, but, I'm assuming like a surfer would have a ritual before they start their day. They wax their board, they get their suit ready, they do their thing, and then they go in the water to surf the waves. Well, like our lives are waves. So breath work for me is that prep. It's every morning, it's that prep. I'm going to sit and do my breath work. I'm going to feel what I need to feel, and then know I have everything it takes to ride the waves and not let them consume me, because I know that I have the capacity to get through it. So it's a long journey to get through it, but that's kind of the gist of how I got to where I'm at. Yeah. That turned into Reflective AF, which is my fatherhood coaching business.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. That's a theme, right? We can intellectualize so many understandings of things, right? But it's that journey from here to here that is the longest journey I think that we will ever take. And you're right, it is the most arduous, because what we can intellectualize further needs to be embodied. And so it becomes a practice of our body, because what we do know is that our body really holds the information of everything that we've encountered in our life, of our experiences, our circumstances. That book, The Body Keeps the Score, the issues are in our tissues. And, until we can look at how our body is, metabolizing our experience, then we will not fully, enter into that healing journey. And it's really cool that, you have this extensive education background and you were actually working as a coach for so many people. But the struggle behind the scenes was like, I know it all and I could tell you all day long what to do, but I was struggling, behind the scenes. And so that's a beautiful, very powerful statement. It's a very powerful thing that you've shared. And, so tell us, as you have said, you have practiced breathwork every single day since February of 2020. What did breathwork do? So if you could share the first thing that breathwork unlocked for you when you started that journey.
Oh yeah, it's a life-changing moment, the catalyst of my healing journey. I was at an IOP. I think at that point it was the second week. I remember being completely shut down and just withdrawn. I was there, but I didn't want to be there. I think the day before I did breath work, I remember I sat in the back and was just completely like, this is stupid. I'm just, negative thoughts, completely consumed. The group even tried to pull around me and send me love and do all this meditation. I was like, fuck you all, I was just so angry.
Yeah. Can I interrupt for a second? So this was your second IOP.
Yeah.
What was the catalyst to enter into the program?
I started EMDR, right? So
okay.
I started EMDR. At that point, my marriage was really struggling. I'm no longer married, but it was really struggling. So EMDR was my attempt of intellectualizing. If I do EMDR, I'll fix my brain.
Okay.
I've already had therapy for 15 years off and on this point, taking medications. I worked in maternal mental health. So I think EMDR for me at that point was like, this is going to fix my brain because I'm giving power to this evidence-based practice. And I don't really believe so much anymore of that world. I think we're all our own healers and that's a tool, but I really gave it power. And I signed up to do it for 2 hours a day or 2 hours twice a week. And that's way too much EMDR. Okay. The therapist, I was paying out of pocket. So, she made a lot of money.
2 hours is a long time.
I don't think it was something that would have been, if she had an understanding of my complex trauma, it didn't present that I had it because I was so able to speak of it, but I was never feeling it. So I did that. And I think after about a couple of weeks of doing 2 hours twice a week, I was no longer able to control my emotions. So I was at work and I was blowing up at work. I couldn't find a key and I just felt so overwhelmed that I would just like storm out, like I can't do this anymore. I'd walk out. And that was really scary because those emotions were unfamiliar in the workplace. At home, it was more, I get grumpy and but at work, it's like I can hold it together, right? And I started noticing a mask, like, holy shit, man, like I'm pretending to be okay and I'm not okay because I started to feel it. EMDR kind of connected me. That eventually, my job at the time was very, very supportive. They recognized the symptoms I was going through and they understood I was going through this therapy that was very intensive. And they asked me to take a mental health leave. So I was very, very blessed in that sense.
Yeah.
So I took a mental health leave for 3 months. I found an IOP to attend. My ex-wife, she was very supportive in that. She helped me find it. She advocated my insurance. It was in Manhattan Beach. It was very, very nice intensive outpatient program. So that first week I went and I was just coming out of this like feeling as if my life was over. Right before I got into the IOP, I was suicidal. I had a plan. I was doing everything I can to ask for help. But at that point, I was just so dysregulated. It didn't really, they didn't know how they could help me. And I was reaching for support. And then eventually went into IOP. It took about a week to come out of my shell. But the day I did breath work, it was the day that I think cracked my heart open and changed my life forever. So it was about a week after fighting the program, excuse me. And so about a week of like being there, but not truly being invested, I started feeling like more like suicidal ideation. And I remember telling myself like, if I can just trust the process and if I can just do this, then I'll go. And if this doesn't work, then that's it. That's it.
Wow.
Like, this has to work, right? Because I've had my whole life going through in and out of therapy and taking medications. And at that point, my life was very difficult. My job, I was burnt out because the systems I was working in didn't allow me to be me. There's just a lot of injustices that were out of my control that were just crushing to my soul. But when I went to this IOP about a week in, I was like, you know what? Like, just trust the process. Like, if this doesn't work, then that's it. But just try this. And I did breath work, and I remember just telling myself, like, I'm going to do it. And we laid down in a room, and we had yoga mats. There's about like 12 of us or something. They guided us through the 3-part breath work. And I remember feeling like, oh, this is kind of silly. This is weird, doing it. And then at some point feeling like tingly and the emotions coming up. And at one point I started kind of shaking and crying. And I remember thinking, like, this kind of feels good, but it's scary. And then thinking, why am I shaking so much? Why am I crying so much? And then I started like feeling, oh, this is like a panic attack. And like, I've had panic attacks, and I've had these anxiety attacks that completely just take everything out of me, where I find myself, you know, like in the corner crying. And I know men don't say this, but like, this shit happens, man. Like, your body has trauma and it's at a head and needs to come out. Something's going to give, right? It's either yelling at your kids or sitting in the corner and rocking back and forth and crying, you know? So I was at that point in my journey. I had no more space to just pretend I was okay.
Wow.
So at that point with the breath work, I was like, oh, I've done this. I've been here. And then I realized that my breath was kind of controlling this. I was like, oh, if I just breathe, I'm okay. So I was staying with the breath. And then at some point I got past this panic feeling, and a sense of being whole and love just washed over me. And I've never, ever felt that in my life. I've never, ever felt complete. I've never felt whole. I've always felt broken. I've always felt like when I was going to get EMDR, I was trying to get them to fix my brain. When I was taking these pills, I was trying to get these pills to balance my chemicals. When I was, when I was trying to make my marriage work, I was trying to fix myself for my ex-wife. But in this breathwork experience, and all we're doing is, with a little bit of guiding, but there's not much. It's a very personalized experience. And in this feeling, I felt whole. That's the word that came to me, is whole, like completely whole. You're everything you have, everything you need is already in you. And that feeling was enough to like make me feel okay. I started crying of joy, and then confusion. And then when I processed it, and when I got back to earth, I just felt good. I just felt like, okay, everything's going to be okay. And I just kept telling myself, okay, you trust the process, keep going. And you trust the process, keep going. And, the funny story is I just kept going, and I told my counselors at the place, like, hey, that really worked for me. I really liked it. And they made a suggestion. They're like, well, why don't you drive here super early, and it was at Manhattan Beach, and go sit on the beach and do breath work before your sessions? Because the first week I was leaving my house at 8, leaving my house 7:30, driving in 2 hours of traffic to get there at 9, and then sit in the IOP. So I was already so wound up. They're like, well, maybe if you get here early, you do breath work and then come to the sessions. And that changed my life, because for 3 months I would go to the beach at 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning and lay on the beach for an hour and do breath work, journal and cry before I went to the IOP. So that was like a just added benefit. I was at the beach doing this breath work every single day because I knew it did something. So when I showed up to the IOP, I was so receptive to it. I was open to it.
Yeah.
And, I think my experience there was a very beautiful experience. There's sound baths, yoga, all kinds of things that I had no idea were so powerful.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. So, just by the mere fact that you allowed yourself to breathe, that 3-part breath, the life force breath, connected you back into this sense of wholeness, which is so incredibly powerful. And for anybody listening, that's going to sound that doesn't really know about this or hasn't really heard about it, it's going to sound really way out there and woo woo and like witchcraft and like all sorts of things, right? Until you actually do it.
Yeah.
And you realize by just breathing, you're actually connecting back into yourself, into your body, your physical body. Not just that though, but you're connecting back into your spirit. And I was having a conversation before the podcast about how, in the ancient Aramaic language of Yeshua, the word rucha means breath and it means spirit. And when we take that breath, which is free and which is designed by Creator to, for us, by us, we actually connect back into home base, into our soul, into our spirit. And when we can do that, and then we can choose or take that next step or respond from that place, then it's a whole different ball game. It's a whole different ball game. So you just shared that you went from suicidal ideation, but also having a plan, to one day having that first encounter with your breath and coming out on the other end like, you know what? I think I'm going to be okay. I just need to trust this process. Like, that's wild.
Yeah.
And that's wild that nothing else gave that to you.
Yeah, I think it was, it's such a visceral, tangible experience. And I've been doing breathwork every single day. So for me, my breath work is very, very intuitive. I do 3-part breath, but I know breath, it happens.
Yeah.
And then I jokingly, and I guide men through it, and I support them in developing a process that supports them. And in my process, I just jokingly say, it's just huff and puff until you feel something. And if you just huff and puff until you feel something, you get pretty comfortable feeling. And if you get comfortable feeling, then you get pretty comfortable being in your body, because a lot of the times we react in ways that are not aligned because we come to our bodies and it doesn't feel right. Because a lot of the times you're moving in places or doing things that are out of alignment with our purpose and our authentic self, right? So our breath is essentially bringing ourselves back to our authentic self. And it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be esoteric. It doesn't have to be woo-woo. It's just, there's many guys out there doing Wim Hof, and they're just literally huffing and puffing. And that can build something. That can tap you into something. Yeah. And it's just a matter of allowing ourselves to let it happen. Yeah. Right? We don't need to be fighting the tool that we have naturally that literally is here to support us in regulating our moods and connecting with ourselves deeply, which connects with, I believe when I do breath work, I have these altered states of consciousness where I'm sitting, where I just describe as like I'm sitting with God. Whatever that means to you, it means something to me, but I'm sitting with God, right? And when you have this experience daily, it's life-changing, it's not something that I put religion to or any kind of specific spiritual modality. It's just a relationship with me and what I feel and know to be God through breath. And breath is that life back into God. And we go through our lives, most of us, just really disconnected, not only from ourselves, but from our breath. And our breath is that catalyst to ourselves, right? And unfortunately, if we experience trauma, that journey from our head to our heart is full of all of these, challenging moments that we have to essentially face and release and accept and love. That piece of loving those parts that we maybe felt shame and guilt around is the part that people might struggle. But with our breath, that's what we can do through it, is we can breathe through it. And if you can get through the stuff and let things go and create the capacity to sit in challenging moments, when we face challenging moments, it's like, I've been here before. I can breathe through this. And it could be that simple. It really is. If it's going to be hard, but if we can stay regulated through it, then we're going to get through it. Yeah.
I think it's important, especially if you're doing it for the first time, is to have a group of people or a guide that can guide you through it. It's kind of like you wouldn't do ayahuasca by yourself or with, somebody that you don't trust, but because it can and it will bring up some pretty intense sensations, either in your physical body or in your emotional body. And I remember the first time that I did it, I was shaking, kind of like what you were experiencing, because, I suffered from panic and anxiety. And so the first time I went to the breath, it brought up my panic and it brought up all of this adrenaline. And, have you ever got the adrenaline shakes after a panic attack and that sort of thing? And so that's kind of what my body was doing. And it was really intense. I had a beautiful guide. She allowed me to feel what I needed to feel and allowed me to feel safe, reassured me that I was safe to experience that. And I find that that's, more than half the battle is just creating a space where an individual feels safe to maybe for the first time feel an emotion, feel it in their body and allowing the sensation without having to suppress it or without feeling so overwhelmed by it that they just completely shut it down. And, you had mentioned that you had experienced trauma. And I think you even said you might have experienced complex trauma. So as you enter into this relationship, this new relationship with the modality of breath work, how did that kind of start to peel back the layers of this trauma or facing the trauma?
For me, it was a very long journey. So for the first year and a half of breath work, I was, first year and a half of the pandemic I was working from home. I had a job that was very supportive, and they gave me the time off that I needed. And I did breath work, and the breath work, elicits strong emotions. I had a lot of stored up stuff. So I sat with it. I sat and I went through those shadows where I would do breath work, and it would start to shake. I would start to cry. I would start to feel these intense feelings. And I trusted that I would be okay. I trusted that these feelings that I had no idea how to even identify them, that if I just breathed through them, I would be okay. So I'm a pretty hardcore dude. I've always done things like, I'm going to get it. And I think at that point in my journey, I was so determined in healing that I was trying to fix myself for my ex-wife, right?
Okay.
About a year and a half into it, I started realizing that I wasn't broken. I needed to fix myself. But that breath work was an intense process the first year and a half that had me go through some of these physical releases, some of these emotions that were so suppressed that I had no idea what they were, this grief that was so deep that it was just never ending. And sitting with that and knowing that I got to the other side every single time is essentially what gave me the encouragement and the reassurance that I was getting somewhere. Because as I was doing this, I felt as if I was becoming more open to just being more present with my daughter, more open to being more compassionate with my ex-wife, developing compassion and empathy for myself. And then it stopped hurting so much because I got to a point where it's like, okay, this is something I can do to call in things, to kind of envision the life I want, to, even manifest all that kooky stuff that is real. If you sit with God every day, you huff and puff, that shit works, and it's a real thing I experience that's tangible. So it's like, why would I stop? But to get through those childhood traumas, I support men and guide them through that because I was lucky enough to have that background, to know that when I was going through these big experiences that I was okay and safe. I believe at some points I went through spiritual psychosis because I was reaching so much for healing, right? Reaching for answers, and through breath work, and I incorporated a lot of cannabis and plant medicine as well when I was in that point in my life. I was able to allow myself just to be. At some point I share this because I'm not embarrassed about it. It's something that I look and reflect back and go, holy shit, we are smart creatures. Our bodies are so intelligent.
Yes.
There was a point where I was so dysregulated in my nervous system because I'm using breath work to learn how to navigate it, and I'm just hitting it every single day and practicing, that I just felt called to wear puffy vests. And I was wearing 2 puffy vests and then tying a belt around my chest. And it was because I was seeking deep pressure. I was seeking comfort. And now I look back, okay, that makes sense. I'm seeking deep pressure because my nervous system's dysregulated. Yeah. And then it got to a point where I'd wake up at 4 a.m. every morning and extreme anxiety. So I would take a cold shower the first thing, then I would go stand in the grass. It's still dark, it's wet. And I would just stand in the grass. And it was something that my body just told me to do.
Wow.
And in those moments, I was kind of judging myself, but at the same time saying, no, just let it happen. Because if I would have got into this place of judgment, I'm like, man, you're going fucking nuts, dude. You're walking around with the belt tied around your chest. You're waking up at 4 and standing in the grass just crying and feeling your feelings. Like, anyone else might have been judging themselves and like, this is crazy. I'm going crazy. But what I believe what was happening is I was allowing myself to just experience being human.
Yeah.
Like, we go through life just trying to fit into molds and fit into what we think people expect of us. And it's not normal for air quotations, it's not normal for a man to wake up at 4 and stand in grass and cry, but that's what I needed at that time because my trauma is so complex. I've learned to give myself grace. Like, it's okay that I struggled through these years and got through it. I was beat as a child, as a kid. I wasn't allowed to cry as a kid. Yeah. So growing up, that just doesn't go away. Like, a lot of people just go, oh, I'm fine.
Yep.
It's like, it just doesn't go away. Like, it comes up, and it comes up in different ways. And I could have been, a miserable man in a marriage that was unhappy, taking lots of pills and never being connected to my body, right? Being disconnected from my family, and just called that okay. But once I connected to my body, there was like no way in hell I could have accepted that. It was just, there's no way I could have sat in the suffering, that I knew that there was a way out. And once I discovered my breath, that was the way out. I had no idea it was going to take me to where I'm at now. I just showed up and did it every day, every single day until I got here.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I have so much compassion and so much reverence for, your story, but for men in general. I think that we've, as a society, for hundreds of years have done a disservice to our men. Because just like you said, you were, beat as a child, and you weren't allowed to cry. You weren't allowed to feel your emotions. You were probably told to, shut the F up and, that sort of thing. And, what you described as being fine is probably the vast majority of our men out there. I mean, I'm hoping that, we're going to start to tip the scales the other way. But yeah, you ask a man how he's doing. I'm cool, man. I'm cool. I'm straight. I'm fine. Yeah. Right. But little do we know that there's just this whole world underneath all of that. And, dare I say, a whole world of maybe even suffering. And so the fact that you just allowed and you gave yourself permission to be like, screw that. I'm going to just allow myself to experience what I need to experience. Yeah, I might be losing it a little bit. I might be going crazy, but I'm just going to ride the wave. Freaking kudos to you, man, for allowing yourself to do that. Because most people would be like, you know what? This is kooky. I'm out. I'm going to just go over here and have, my vodka soda and just call it a day and just numb out, or, whatever. But it's incredible that you allowed yourself to just be like, this is crazy, but I'm going to just hold the line and I'm going to do it anyways. And then you came out on the other side, and now you are in service to other men, to other fathers, which is huge. This is what we need. We both come from a generation where, you just kind of suck it up and you took it, right? Mm-hmm. We come from a generation of parents that were maybe the silent generation, maybe boomers, that sort of thing, where again, you don't feel, you just do, you act, you move forward, you just push through. And I believe that we are starting to change the tide in all of this. So thank you for that work that you do. It's incredible. How old is your daughter now?
Oh, my daughter's 8. She'll be 9 in October. So,
and how is the journey? Because man, you're in the trenches. I mean, I think any stage of parenthood are the trenches. Mm-hmm. My youngest is 13 going on 14, and my oldest is going to be 21, and I've got 4. And there's just different shades of oh my gosh, this is hard. So how is being in that stage?
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's great. It's challenging, and it teaches me a lot. And I learned so much from her. And it's funny because I do this work. I'm supporting fathers. I'm a trauma-informed fatherhood coach. And, I just got divorced, but 2 years ago. It's been about a year and a half or so. And I think sometimes people forget the child's going through the divorce as well.
Sure.
Right? So there's a lot of, unfortunately, my daughter grew up around 2 parents that were not functioning healthy in a relationship, right? So there's a reason why we're divorced. And I have nothing bad to say about her mom ever. She's a beautiful woman, and she supported me all the way through until we decided things were not going to work out. But it was something that looking at our divorce and then being able to support her and putting her at the center has been most, if not all of our focus in the relationship. Mm-hmm. And that has actually strengthened my co-parenting relationship with my ex-wife. But with that being said, it's not like we're just all happy-go-lucky.
Right,
it's
of course not.
She witnessed for most of her life dysfunctional relationships. So I often am reminded that I have wounds that I'm still working through.
Sure.
A lot of the wounds that were, present in my marriage are showing up in my daughter. And it's something that I have to remind myself, or allow her to be where she's at, meet her with love and compassion, and be gentle and kind, right? Versus I'm trying to fix this or trying to get you to take a deep breath, breathwork saved my life. For her, she doesn't like breathwork. She's like, nope, I don't want to do it. It's not for me.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, try it, please. But it's something that I know I'm modeling for her. It's something that she has witnessed, a father who was unable to control his temper at some points, to a father that's like, I'm feeling a little frustrated. Give me a second, Eleanor, so I can just take a deep breath, And I'm okay that I have to use these tools. I'm okay that I still struggle. And I think that's the difference.
It is.
That's the difference, is I've learned to give myself grace through it. And in that, we're able to recover. Kids are resilient.
Yes.
Kids are so resilient. And the times before I had these tools, I would blow up or have this overreaction to something, and then I would spiral in my head and be like, I'm just a horrible dad. I'm not cut out for this. And I would beat myself up, take myself from the situation, and just not be present, right? And now I'm able to, okay, I did something that I could have done better.
Yeah.
But let me just sit here with it. Let me take a deep breath.
Yes.
Let me talk to my daughter. Let me take ownership of it and share it. I was struggling. This is hard, and I'm still going to show up doing the best I can, and then move forward with grace. And in that, slowly inviting her back into that trusting relationship that is still being worked on, right? Because, it's like, it's a traumatic experience for a kid to have a divorce, and it's something that the work I do is not just for the men I support and the men I work with. It's also myself and my story within it, right? Like, my journey is just a mirror of so many other men's.
Yeah.
And I know that I've been so blessed to be able to have frameworks and understandings and my own experience to be able to give words to this experience. And in that, support men in developing this capacity to sit with emotions that are difficult when it comes to their children. So when it comes to my daughter, it's wonderful. It's beautiful. She's really into Minecraft right now. So that's pretty cool. She learned how to swim this summer.
Oh, nice.
So that was her main goal. So we've been spending a lot of time in the pool. But there's those little hiccups, and we get through them. And I can say I really take ownership for my part. I apologize. I repair. So there's ruptures, but we have the repair.
Yes. So. That's big. That's really, really big. Because as parents, we kind of forget that, I think we can, and our children can put parents up on a pedestal, like, what they say is word, what they say is bond. I knew I grew up in a household where you respect your elders no matter what, even if there was harm done emotionally and or physically, right? And that's just it's not right. And the repair is really important because, again, I say there's mom 1.0 and then mom 2.0. And, I kind of got into this, early in my 40s. And the mom that my kids have now is different than the mom that was before in terms of regulating my nervous system, not falling back on ways to parent them, based on how I was raised. And that repair in the relationship is so important. And the accountability of, like, I lost my temper. I used words that I probably shouldn't have, and I did things that I am sorry for. And when they can see you hold accountability and own it, it changes the trajectory forever. It really, really does. Because then they're like, oh, okay, mom and dad are human too. But the fact that you're showing your daughter that this is what, you're modeling, this is what redemption looks like, right? This is what repair looks like. This is what being a human being looks like. We mess up and there are hiccups, but there's always an opportunity for repair. And it's really through taking accountability, forgiving ourselves first and foremost for doing things that we did in misalignment of who we really are. And then just saying, hey, okay, we're going to try this again. And we're going to take the next step forward. So thank you for that. Thank you so much for sharing your beautiful, beautiful story. You and I came to know each other through our Anchor into Healing Men's workshop, our very, very first one over a year ago now. And you've been to a few. So it's always wonderful to see you show up for other men too, because as we know, healing really happens in community. We can't do it in isolation. Sure, we can spend time alone and we can do our breath work alone, but the sharing of your story, the sharing of our story is actually the salve and the medicine for others to be able to say, hey, I'm not alone in this. And I know that there is a way through because I saw somebody go through that. And what was really interesting was that first that first anchor into healing that you attended, right next to you was a friend of mine who also was going through some really heavy stuff. And he was also experiencing suicidal ideation. And it was no mistake that you guys were standing right next to each other. So I absolutely love the work that you're doing. I appreciate it. I applaud you for it. Keep on sharing. And I just thank you so much for being in this space, in the healing space with me and on the podcast. But before we end, I always like to ask my guest, is there a song or a sound that sings you home?
I listened to an artist named The Grouch. I know the name doesn't sound very welcoming and happy, but it's someone that I've listened to since I was 16.
Okay.
And his music's really positive, and it has a lot of really great messages in it. Something I'll meditate and I'll throw that music on. So
The Grouch,
The Grouch, yeah. There's an album I was listening to just recently called Unlock the Box.
Okay.
It's very spiritual, but it doesn't sound so spiritual if you just listen to it in passing. But if you listen to the lyrics and really, really dissect the songs and the music, it's good stuff. And that's kind of what guides me in a sense. It's kind of a funny thing. It's kind of cool because this healing journey is anything you want, right? Like it's anything you make it. For me, that's something that I really connect with. It's his music.
Yeah.
I'm not like a super fan or anything, but I listen to his music a lot. And it's music has taught me to feel my emotions. That's another tool, right? Is listening to music and letting it bring emotions up and then saying, oh, what are these ones? And then just kind of sitting with it until you kind of make friends with it.
It's another type of medicine, just like breathwork. It's a sound, it's a frequency. That's beautiful. So how can people work with you? How can they find you?
I'm on Instagram at reflective.af. I offer 12-week coaching containers, trauma-informed coaching containers. I work with fathers who experience childhood abuse and neglect that are on their healing journey. A lot of fathers I work with have run the gamut of healing modalities, ayahuasca trips and mushrooms and breathwork and Reiki. I do this work from a grounded place. I've been down those paths. I've experienced it. And I know the power in them. But when it comes down to it, it's supporting them back to themselves. Yeah. So it's kind of the type of fathers I work with, but I'm open to support any type of father that really is open to do this work.
Amazing.
I also host a parent support group on the first Wednesday of every month. That's open to moms and dads. It's on Zoom at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's the first Wednesday of each month. I have a Fatherhood AF support group that is open to just dads on the third Wednesday of each group at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Zoom. Wow. So that's the first Wednesday and third Wednesday. Those are free. They're donation-based, but they're free. A good group of parents show up, and something I've been doing for about a year now every Wednesday, and it's just my way to bring parents that feel like they're alone to spaces where they can realize they're not alone. Yeah. If a parent has experienced childhood trauma or neglect, being a parent is not easy, and it brings up a lot of stuff that might be very difficult to get through. And essentially, we don't have to do it alone. We heal in community. We heal in connection with someone that can sit and witness and validate our stories simply by being present. Not trying to change us, not trying to fix us, just by sharing and witnessing.
Yeah. Right? Yep, 100%. Thank you so much. Those are beautiful offerings. And thank you again for coming.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Yay.